Hello, welcome to Making Creativity Pay. With the Edinburgh Fringe in full swing, I spoke to a number of performers about the marketing and promotional aspects of the Fringe. Thanks very much for coming on the podcast. Can you tell us who you are and a little bit about the show?
Hello, everyone. I'm Damien St John, writer, comedian, stand-up performer, business entrepreneur, plugger, social media expert, marketing whiz, all the things that you need to be these days when you're doing a live show. I created and co-write Wrestling with the Champs, a scripted wrestling comedy podcast, award nominated, which we feel is pretty good for a show that's now in its third year, which is quite exciting. And yeah, it's been a really lovely show to create. So my comedy background actually started in 2011 when I did the Muse Moose stand-up comedy course in London for about sort of 6 to 8 weeks. That was run, Logan Murray was your guy who was leading the classes every week. Super talented, super amazing comedian and writer. And that was really nice to sort of, you kind of have that burning thing of goes, could I be a comedian? What does it mean? I don't know anything, right? And short of going to comedy university, which doesn't exist. It was like, okay, you put 400 quid on the table and go and do a course and see if you like it, right? You've got to take a punt on something in your life just to see where it's going to go. So I did the course, really great to kind of, see and feel what it's like to be a comedian. And there's a lot of advice that was in the course that stayed with me. Then you get thrown out into the real world and you've got to learn how to promote yourself, and you've got to decide whether you want to enter comedy competitions, for example. And that was one of the questions I put to Logan right at the beginning was, I could get a spot on a comedy thing. What should I do? And he's like, well, if you want to do it and you see value in it, go for it. There isn't this is good, this is bad, because everyone's going to come at it from a different view. Everyone's going to have a different thing that they want to achieve. And I think when you start off brand new, all things are possible. All shiny things are within your reach, but you've got to just try a few things first to decide if you like. But yeah, did stand-up comedy for a couple of years. The highlight was beating the gong at the London Comedy Store in 2012, which is on YouTube. We'll still watch it. And that is terrifying as well, because if you know the format of that, basically, it's 8:00, London, touristy type audience. They've had a bit to drink. They're a bit rowdy. So I did comedy, had a big break till 2017 when I thought, you know what? I don't know if I can drive 2 hours to do a 10-minute spot 3 nights a week, because at the point of this, right, that's well expensive. So I decided to turn my hands to writing. So I wrote a TV pilot because I thought, well, why not? Something new. So I wrote a TV pilot for a show called Apocalypse Wales. And it was kind of The Walking Dead meets sort of Two Up, Two Down, Steptoe and Son in the middle of the Welsh Valleys. And it got placed in the BAFTA Rowcliffe TV Forum list, which is their kind of BAFTA Rowcliffe do annual sort of TV comedy, TV drama, TV kids writing. And then, you get invited to BAFTA. It's really nice. I didn't win, but there's 3 other acts that get their shows performed, but you're kind of commended. And, the judges thought you guys were also really brilliant. So here's a pat on the back. Here's some industry networking opportunities, et cetera, et cetera. Then I was like, okay, well, I think I've identified I might be okay at writing. But then got married, as we discussed, spoiler, then had kids. And then thought, well, podcasting is much bigger than it used to be. When I started in radio, we had audio, right? You could have Listen Again. There was no, thousands of shows you can tap into at any given moment. There was no Spotify. Apple didn't have podcasts. So I was like, I've kind of got this muscle memory of audio production. I've got the writing. Let's try and bring it together and see if something's there. And so Wrestling with the Champ came about because I needed somebody else to work with. I'd done the hard yards. I'd done all this kind of solo stuff. I was like, I just want to collaborate with somebody. And Ant, who plays the Champ, aka the Ginger Ninja, I'd met a few years before working in radio, and we lived super close to each other. So I was like, you are the perfect guy to play a 6'2" ginger wrestler. Funnily enough, I couldn't do it myself. So I sent Ant over some scripts, and we kind of workshopped those and tested out the character a little bit, and just hit go in June 2020. And I think Ant, he won't mind me saying, it's kind of, this is all kind of new to him. He's a natural performer, but that doesn't mean he's got the same sort of comedy background or education or kind of habits as me. You can put him in a room and he's the people magnet. I'm an extrovert in a room full of introverts. The kind of the opposite, really. So I was like, I think we work well sort of kind of contrasting each other, but also you could play somebody that's larger than life because, and goes around sticking cans of Coke on his forehead and impressing kids in the street. That's it. It's like a showpiece. So yeah, so we kind of started there in 2020. And so my point with AMP was sort of like, where's it going? What's it doing? What does it want to look like? And I was like, wait, where do you put that first brush stroke on the canvas? Sometimes you know, sometimes you don't, but you just keep going. And then you take a step back. And if you need to redraw, you redraw, right? So I can't tell you that it's going to end up being anything that we do more than half a dozen times. I can't say it's going to be monetized. I can't say it will turn into a live show or a TV show, but let's have all those ambitions. Let's just bed in our product and see where we are, but kind of approach it with like a business mentality, I think, because you don't want to, a bunch of people will do podcasts and then kind of go, I've been going 10 episodes and no one listens. Right. And this is probably the point where you ask me some questions, but I think you're mindful of not just plowing ahead in one direction without approaching it strategic, right? If you just want to make something in your bedroom and it's for 6 people, you've absolutely succeeded in that. But if you're kind of seeking a validation through podcasting or through any kind of performance, are you sure that that's the right way you want your validation, right? But B, have you really thought about how you want to get there? And I think that's that kind of, you've got the heart and the soul that you want to put into it, but you've kind of got to take a step back first and just don't be afraid to commit some idea to the page to help guide you, because you'll start to hate what you love if you're not approaching it with a strategic mindset.
Yeah, you need a bit of direction, just completely freeform. No, absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
And so obviously you're at the Fringe this year. You had the show last year. Was that the first time you'd kind of taken it anywhere?
So, and again, I had done comedy before, went back to writing. So I hadn't done stand up when we put the show on stage for 10 years. But again, muscle memory, become a different person on stage. But I said to Ant, look, we've done the show podcast for 2 years. It's grown a bit. We were fortunate enough that some friends of ours were involved in the startup of the Sports Social Podcast Network. Which, if you've got a sports podcast, talk to them about how they can help you grow and love what you're doing. And as the world kind of opened back up again after COVID, I was like, I feel that we're 2 years in. We should maybe try and get to a festival. So I don't want to be gigging 3-4 nights a week because neither of us will have the money for that. And, I've got 2 kids now. I don't actually want to be away from them a lot. I like them and I like Ant, but do good, get the balance right. So I said, let me try and get a gig at a festival. This was kind of September 2022. We looked at we had some photo material, some video material that kind of brought the character to life. We'd taken something fictional, turned it into, we actually put a wig on and actually made him dress up like a wrestler and took some photos and went beyond the podcast, if you like, to do something else. And so, we got 2 shows at Leicester Comedy Festival and they were 2 40-minute shows. Right? So an Edinburgh hour is 50 minutes with a bit of sort of setup and pack down. And so Ant's first 2 gigs were 2 40-minute stand-up sets. Not the usual kind of, would you just do 5 minutes here and there and build up your confidence? I was like, I will drill this into you. I will give you a crash course in how to learn quickly. We'll rehearse our backsides off. We'll get there. We'll do the shows and then we'll kind of see. So Leicester 2022 was our first 2 performances. Then this is me, right? I go, cool. What can we do next? We've got to go to Edinburgh, right? Sure. We've done the biggest comedy festival in Europe. Let's do the world's largest arts festival in Edinburgh. And he was like, okay. and Ant will tell you that by the time we got to Edinburgh, so, I did all the paperwork, paid all the fees, et cetera, put it on the credit card and just start to have a plan. But he will say he was physically sick most mornings before performances because it's just not, it's that kind of sort of inertia that propels you forward. And then you kind of look back and think, why am I doing this? But here's a great quote. He was like, what would I rather be doing? That or just worrying about it? So I go off and do it. So Edinburgh was our first festival run experience. And we, my career now is content marketing, right? It's what I love doing, pays the bills, keeps the lights on, allows me to kind of flex my creative muscle quite a lot. So I kind of was able to take a lot of that strategy and that knowledge and apply it to the Fringe and how we might approach it. not to say that it was perfect or right, but it just gave me a bit of a grounding as to what would work and what wouldn't work, rather than spray and pray and then learn an expensive mistake, try to mitigate that. So we did boring things like set up spreadsheets, and rather than just go, this is a cool costume, I'll buy it. I was like, every time you buy something, I'll run the purse strings, put it in the spreadsheet. And actually every week we'll go, here's how much we've spent on flyers, on stickers, on badges, accommodation. Here's our allowance for food, for which we blew every day. Because soggy sandwiches at Boots are really, really demoralizing. So we approached it, and then we did some crowdfunding for it last year. And that kind of helped offset about 50% of our costs, to be honest with you, which was really happy. But we kind of did the calculations and worked out, actually, we could get to 50% paid with then, that's half the work done before you get there. So by the time you arrive, our shows are with the PVH free Fringe. So the audiences don't pay any money. We don't have to pay for a venue, unlike other promoters that will charge you £60 or £100 per room. It's up to you. You've got to fill it. We're very lucky with the Fringe, the PVH free Fringe, that they can do that for us. But again, you can take donations afterwards. So I said, well, let's aim for 50% up front, 50% by the time we've finished, and see where we are in year one. Yeah.
And so do you kind of have a set kind of post-show speech or an approach? Do you go for humor? Do you go for a kind of a bit more, better phrase, kind of guilt trip people and say, come on,
all of that. Definitely guilt trip people. Guilt is one of the most powerful marketing tools alongside, and sales tools, along with fear and sex, right? If you're not leading with a strong emotion, why are you bothering? But no, seriously. So what we had, so it all kind of joins in together. We're lucky that it's character comedy. Again, not another man on the street in a check shirt saying, I'm doing a stand-up show about relationships, come and see me. We were all, and no judgment on that, right? But I'd done that. I was like, I'm not going back down that road again, because you're one of many. We've got character comedy. That's one of few in comparison. But also we brought this guy to life. So let that be our flyering, rather than, hi, you've got a face, would you like to come and see some comedy? We took Anne out on the streets every day for a few hours and did like a ring walk around Edinburgh. And, it's a wrestling comedy. If people haven't worked that out, or maybe I didn't mention it, you are a magnet for people that like that stuff. If they don't like it, why waste your time, right? There's that phrase is, go fishing where the fish are, or try and target the thirsty rather than the well-fed, because they're not interested in what you've got. You have to make it so much more compelling with no money behind you to kind of jump ahead of the queue of the big guys. So we're lucky that it was niche. We could kind of parade around and people would ask us and stop and take photos and tag us on social media. So that kind of helped, a bit of word of mouth. And I think probably maybe 3 or 4 people for each show are people that we'd bumped into like that. And they're like, oh, no way. Or you'd see people the other thing is you'd see people with wrestling t-shirts walking around, and you go, there you are. I'm going to go and talk to you and see if you're interested. So again, we didn't have a spray and pray, because we sort of clearly defined what we did. So therefore, people that come in feel a bit more invested than just, it's raining outside, it's somewhere I can get a drink, I'll sit on there till it's boring. It's wrestling comedy. You've decided whether you want it or not before you've come in. So hopefully we felt we had a strong pull. But yeah, we do a bucket speech afterwards. Normally the ends of the shows are really frantic and messy and chaotic and confusing. So it's a good time to sort of go, look, that was crazy, wasn't it? Have you got a couple of quid? We'll often say, like, because Ant's character, the Ginger Ninja, comes from the fictional world of the Pub Wrestling Federation, the lowest league of all wrestling, below the Leisure Centre League and the Working Men's Alliance. We kind of like to say, look, we think we're worth the price of a pint. Maybe not an Edinburgh pint, but if you can stretch to it, right? And people are normally pretty good. I think we got some decent money through that. I think average per head was maybe between £3 to £5, which is really good. And then we do, there's cash in a bucket. You've got contactless. We're going to set up a QR code on a wall this time, because we definitely noticed what happens is the downside of being flooded with people that want to talk to you. He says flooded, 12 people after a show. But of course, we're all super passionate about the same topic, so it makes sense. Is that I'd noticed a few people kind of had their card out of their wallet, kind of hovering around, waiting to talk. And then they were like, oh, I've got another show to do. I'll leave it. I'll go. It's free, right? I can,
Yeah.
and that's absolutely fine, right? No pressure on that. But we want to be able to capture you if you feel that you'd like to give, here's a QR code. You can just do it rather than wait for us. So yeah, we chat to them, but we don't squeeze them too hard. I think we believe in the ethos of the free Fringe. A lot of people now find it really difficult as comedy tourists, right, to commit to more than a long weekend in Edinburgh because of the costs. And then there's the price of the tickets, right? So if you want to go and see Catherine Ryan, you're paying £200, £300 a night in a hotel. Your train ticket is £200 each. You then look to offset that value with free comedy. And that's kind of how we position it. Look, if you're coming up anyway, see who you want to see. We're not trying to stop people from going to the John Bishops and the Jack Whitehalls and the Romeshes, right? That's pro-choice. But if you're here for 3 days, you might as well plug all those gaps with as much free stuff as you're interested in. Because otherwise it's going to feel like a very expensive holiday.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, how have you found with the free? I mean, talking to some other people on the podcast who are doing a free show as well. And they say a lot of the time, they'll be ready to perform and they've got no idea how many people are turning up. I mean, did you see real big swings in terms of, volume?
Oh man. So that was really interesting because the show this year is on at 5:00 every day at Burrito and Shake on Southbridge. So with really nice location, and the PBH Free Fringe have been really helpful with that. And they tried to support all their artists as much as possible. We had a venue last year, which is in the Omni Centre, which is kind of, you're having to explain it on the Royal Mile. It's down there, turn left, look out for the sign. Oh, it's right at the back. Blah, blah. It was a hard sell to people who didn't already want to come, right? But there are challenges with getting venues. I really appreciate that. And, not turning my nose up at anything. What we found is that the show last year was 4:15 and could be ready in the green room, which hilariously didn't have a curtain anymore. Because I think there was a falling out and someone took it. So it was just a room with no green. Ant would be ready at 4:15, right? We've set the music up, it's pumping on the rock music, kind of get people interested. I'd be in the room at 4:14, 4:15 with no audience. And I'd start going, and how you feeling? Yeah, come on. Yeah, stay positive. Don't let that negative self-doubt creep in. It's going to be good. And I was like, and if no one turns up, right, it's just a great rehearsal. Because some comedians will go, well, I'm not doing a show because there's no audience. I don't like to tell comedians what to do ever, but I think that's a mistake because you don't know who's going to be in your next show. You don't know who's just really wants to be at your show and is stuck on a bus or is having an asthma attack or is just really desperate to see you. And again, they paid this fortune to be in Edinburgh and you've gone, well, no one's here to see me. Right. I'm off. Just it. That's a mistake. So I say to them, we're just going to give it 5 minutes. So if it's 4:15, there's no one, let's delay it by 5. Let's start at 4:20. It doesn't matter. And every time we did that, we would have an audience. It was either a big group of people that had been trying to find the venue because it was in the middle of nowhere, couldn't find it right. Give everyone more credit. Yeah. So I think we always had some people. Sometimes it was 8. Sometimes, weirdly enough, 2 shows were like 30 or 40 people in. We just got lucky, right? You don't know why. But yeah, I just always just do the show. Just practice and rehearse and do the show.
As you say, shows at 5. What's your kind of approach for either flyering or promo, kind of being outside? Will you kind of do like a half-mile radius around the venue, or will you go where people are? And will you do it kind of all morning or just like an hour before? Or do you kind of mix it up?
That's a great question. And just the thought of the sheer amount of work that we're going to be doing has brought me out in a flop sweat. So thank you for that, Dan. I'm fortunate enough that in the company that I work for now, we're allowed to do a kind of work from anywhere policy. So I've got the freedom to take my work and do it remotely from Edinburgh. So I've said to those guys, look, I'll be online first thing in the morning through to lunchtime. And then is it okay if I bob off and do the show? And they're like, yeah, fine. We're happy to support that. So my day effectively with Ant will start with him fast asleep while I'm in the kitchen working super hard. We'll then go into he'll get dressed. We'll go into town for lunch, literally get off the bus and then just walk. Right. We might go to the venue, but it's downstairs in a burrito bar. So what are you going to see? But we'll usually walk, pound the pavement, do the up and down, just basically being high footfall areas because we've got this visibility. We don't blend in. And that's interesting. Ant really struggles when we're together. Like we went to the WWE Clash in the Castle and we went to Money in the Bank at the O2. The Money in the Bank stuff was a Friday night SmackDown. So a live TV taping, and then Saturday night with the big pay-per-view. We didn't go in costume on the Friday, and it felt really weird because we were anonymous. And we're used to people coming up and talking to us and taking photos, and it didn't feel right. And it felt really natural on Saturday because all of a sudden people, at worst, they think you're a crazy cosplayer, but at best, they've seen you at previous events, which people do come up. Hey, I saw you in Cardiff, or I listened to the show. It's really good. So it's nice to kind of be embedded in the community. So I think we just like to get out and walk the streets. What we're doing more strategically this year that we found had value last year was guesting on other people's shows. So I think we did 11 shows or 9 shows last year and then 2 guests. I think we're doing 7 nights of performances and we've got 3 guest spots that we'll do kind of like lunchtime to 2:00 in the afternoon. So, you just do 5 or 10 minutes. So we'll either do a bit of our show or a bit of last year's show that works really nicely with some audience interaction. Then, break off, maybe do some traditional flyering, break off again, do rehearsal, do a run through before the show, break off, have some downtime, and then just be in the venue from like half an hour, 40 minutes before the show starts, especially if there's a show on afterwards. You might be able to drag some people back in, but what are we also doing? We're doing the guesting. Oh yeah, you can apply to be a street performer as well with the Edinburgh Fringe, which we saw. So we've put in for that as well because, Ant won't need a microphone. But I think we're just trying to use that flyering time more strategically rather than just, hi, would you like the big issue? He says slightly facetiously, right? You're in Edinburgh. You either know what you want or you don't know what you want, but they've got to find you and you've got to have a way about you that means you can have people gravitate towards you. So, I'm not saying I'd imagine kind of boards or a 6'2" wrestler next to them, but it helps.
I was going to say, part of being in that character, it kind of filters your audience. I'd imagine some people are crossing the street, when they see him.
All the time. But, it's that, you're having fun, right? And what's really nice is you just want to dress the way you want to dress and do what you want to do. We bumped into the Iron Brew. We're doing some promo there. So they like, oh, would you do some stuff? Could you put it on social? So you get a few thousand people viewing stuff on there. Is that going to equate to any bums on seats? Probably not. But what it does do, and again, this is, if anyone wants advice, right? What I would say is no matter what you do by putting yourself in a situation, see it as a learning and a growth opportunity. So if you're doing some promo, Iron Brew are there and they say, take a video with this giant can of Iron Brew and stick it on your social. Use it as an opportunity to challenge yourself creatively rather than think, oh, but no one's going to come and see the show. Don't do that. Your constant growth mentality of, we could do a nice video and then people will see you as a performer away from the festival because it's such a bubble, right? That video will live for weeks or months on your Instagram feed or your TikTok. So it's a chance for people to discover you after the festivals too. We bumped into someone on the street who was running the TikTok account for Fringe, the official TikTok-y thing. Right? They're not going to come up to us. They're not going to know us from Adam, but pink sparkly jacket, giant wrestler. Oh, you look cool. You could be. So again, no one's going to watch that necessarily and go, right, the show's on in 3 hours. You're going to miss that window. You will miss that opportunity to get that person watching it to your show. But what you will do is you'll elevate your brand. So if you've got any opportunity to be creative at the Fringe, I think you'll see the rewards down the line because of the perception of who you are as a performer, not necessarily how many people turned up to your show.
Yeah. And doing a week, again, talking to other people before, a week, 10 days seems to be more common now than it was, whereas before it was like kind of, lots of people wanted to do the full month for the full experience, but they're having to kind of cut back. Was that just like a kind of, like you said, kids, work, life in general, a week is a nice balance?
I think it is a balance. And I think so again, the PBH Free Fringe will say, look, Peter is really great at, with a wealth of experience and is very direct. So you've got to prepare yourself for, do I want advice or not? Or actually, do I want to just be told everything's possible and away I go, right? He'll be like, you're not going to get discovered. You're not going to become the next sensation. You won't be playing live at the Apollo next week. And I think that's not to kind of kill your vibe or to be, a mood hoover or anything like an emotional vampire. It's actually just to help you get a grasp on the reality of the situation. So what you do rather than putting all your eggs in one basket and going, I had a great experience. I'm thousands of pounds in debt and I haven't been picked up by an agent, right? Your odds of making anything in life like that, like standing at one end of a basketball court, turning your back on the net, throwing the ball behind your head and landing the ball in the net in the first go. In terms of what you can achieve on your first try with anything, it all takes hard work. You've got to be there. You've got to learn. You've got to decide what you want to do each year and just grow. So if you spent all your money in 1 year, would you rather not just do 1 weeks across 3 years and iterate and improve and come up with a new show? So I think, again, rather than pressurize your summer and, put your kids on beans on toast for the rest of the year, just slow down a little bit, make it work for you and, consider like a 3-year strategy for what you're trying to do. So yeah, but there is kind of that balance there too. But what's going to happen what would you get out of it in 3 weeks versus 1, other than tired, possibly very ill, and you a bit bitter. I'll be honest. There's a few comedians I know that have spent lots of time doing Edinburgh and they're like, oh, I didn't really get much out of it. Well, you've flogged it for 3 weeks, and chances are you were exhausted by sort of 10 days in. Your performances might have been off. You might not be giving it the full spirit. So I think you can have a really nice long week or 10 days, much like a holiday. But after that, I think your mentality changes and you start to feel pressured. So yeah, well, a week feels fine. It seems sensible. I know that's going to challenge some promoters because it seems that they like to, and that's the model that probably needs to change as well. They like to go, I want one act to do 4 o'clock every day for the entire Fringe. Lovely, £60 a day. That's my life, really easy. It's not a logistical nightmare. I think how that model works will have to change because, and it won't change unless people are constantly going, well, and I've got to do the full run or they won't give me a gig. You can absolutely find a spot at the comedy festival anywhere at any festival. Just got to be realistic about what year 1 and year 2 looks like.
Yeah. Talking to someone who performed last year, that did the full month, they said, doing it every day improved them. Like they got better, but by about day 20, that was kind of the limit. And then it kind of starts to degrade a bit. But obviously a venue's, not necessarily going to want to put you up for 20 days.
No. And of course, accommodation has skyrocketed. If you're not lucky enough to be able to stay with friends or have access to cheap, accommodation, it's going to be a real struggle. I mean, comedians are commuting in from Glasgow, places like that because where it's cheaper and you're not seeing the kind of, accommodation wave that the prices skyrocket. So we'll always find a way to adapt. What's really interesting is the last year or two from doing the show live has put me in a thought process that actually there should be there's a class war, right, in Edinburgh Fringe, definitely those who have and those who have not, and those who can and those who can't. But podcasting and comedy are absolute bedfellows. They really belong in the same space in terms of niche, small audiences, low growth, need a strategy, need to keep going, need to get somewhere. Otherwise you're just going in a closed loop all the time. So I've set up a media production company called Podomedy. I was not quite used to saying it yet because it's so new. But the idea is that like performance-based podcasting. So we want to help comedians grow their audience through analysis and insight, but also making sure the basics are right, making sure you've got a strategy, making sure you know where you want to go as a performer and how podcasting can help support that growth. Because, monetizing podcast is very easy if you've got money behind you already. It's tricky if you don't either have money or time. So I think that's where Podomedy comes in, because we want to be able to say to you, we've got time, we've got expertise, we've got a bit of experience. The knowledge sharing is free, the advice is free, the strategy is free. We want to help you grow your audience financially through ad revenue and sponsorship, and we'll work alongside you to help you get there with your product. And I think to that point, why do a month at Edinburgh, only 3 weeks at Edinburgh, if you don't have a podcast? Because surely the pinnacle of your year is going up with a bunch of stuff that people can tap into once they've seen you. If you loved it, hey, there's a whole podcast you can listen to. Right? You're feeding people that enjoyed your show back into your own ecosystem so they can enjoy more of what you do. So if you're a comedian and you don't have a podcast, you should absolutely be podcast. And that should be your bread and butter alongside with gigging. Because, if you're exhausted on day 20 of the Edinburgh Festival, right? Well, if you had a podcast that was every week, bi-weekly, or at least monthly, you'd feel less pressured because you'd be seeing more stable returns from your other creative outlet. So again, I think you'll find maybe less pressure on these live expensive performances up front.
Have you found many people who turn up know you from the podcast? Do you get a few every show?
It's a running joke because the truth would hurt you. We always go, have we got any listeners in tonight? And you get one hand goes up at the back or whatever. But I think that's not indicative of the success of your podcast. It shows you how hard it is to access. Edinburgh Festival is premium live comedy. Never mind the performers who are working on a shoestring with no money and going to be thousands of pounds a day. It's expensive to get to. And you look at wrestling, for example. The wrestling fans might not be that. They may or may not be in the upper tax bracket. I suspect some of them not. So what you're effectively doing is saying, if you want to engage with me, you got to put a bunch of money up front. And actually, I think as a comedian trying to grow your audience through podcasting and supporting it with live appearances is valuable. That also takes time, and you have to be in more places. So we recently performed in Manchester for the first time at the Manchester Fringe. And, we absolutely hammered the backside off our social presence. We put a little bit of money into Instagram advertising. You can advertise for like £1 a day. Just do a week here and there. If you're promoting, when you launch and when you're about to do your show is the best time. If you've got 4 months in between, don't think I've got to spend a ton of time advertising along the way, because people aren't in the decision-making process then. They're thinking about more short-term things. So yeah, we did a little bit of, 7-day advertising, £1 a day. Let's put the price of 2 Costa coffees in and see if it makes a difference. What was also interesting is we did some Reddit advertising for the first time. Again, similar sort of pay structure. We just did a week, but within that week, our podcast was the 3rd most popular wrestling podcast in Norway on Apple. And it went into I know, weird, right? Like, put that on your tombstone. And then it went to number 11 in the Irish wrestling Apple iTunes chart. And it's interesting, actually, if you just start dipping your toe into those waters where the fish are going to be. And I think a marketing truism is, you've got to pull a lot of levers for the first time to see what works. But the ones that don't work, stop pulling them and, pull the others twice as hard. You've got to kind of cross over and cross-pollinate what you're doing. We monetize this show a tiny bit with Patreon. We're very lucky that we had that launched in time for the Leicester Comedy Festival. Bit of strategy and a bit of work to get it up and running. So that helps bring in a bit of spare change. We have a merchandise store that, you get a certain percentage of if you sell a t-shirt or a bum bag or any kind of weird thing you can put your logo on. And we took our script from Edinburgh last year and turned it into a hardback, paperback and ebook on Amazon. So, you can spend £15 on a hardback. You can spend £8 on a paperback. You can spend £3 on an ebook, or get that free if you're with Kindle Unlimited. Right. So you're just spreading yourself out a little bit better in year 3 to see where people are taking bites.
And how have you found, because there's always that, I kind of use the analogy of kind of a strong man pulling a jumbo jet. They'll exert all the effort, but to start with, you see absolutely nothing, and they'll gradually kind of pull it, and then you've got the wheels. You start to get that momentum, but at the start, it looks like absolutely nothing's happening at all, and it's difficult to know. Be patient; it'll come, or no, you're wasting your time, and it's being, I guess, like you said, being honest with yourself as well.
Yeah, you got to feel it for yourself. They'll say with weight loss, right? That the thing you said about the jumbo jet, and then juxtapose the weight loss, the size of a jumbo jet. But you won't see any results in the first 2 or 3 weeks necessarily. You might get some kind of anecdotal feeling that tells you you're sleeping a bit better, or drinking less caffeine and replacing that with water, for example. But you once you notice a change, you know something's working. So I think you've just got to persevere with a bit of gut instinct. But I think, again, that's where we bring Podomedy into it, is we can go, who's your audience? Where are they listening? Where's your comedy? What platforms are you on? Should you be spending hours a day trying to build a merchandise store, or is that a down the line job, right? Should you be going to Patreon when you've got 12 listeners? You shouldn't. It's like a conversion rate of like 1% will buy into that. So, you've got to have 100 listeners to get one. So there's certain starting points where you should expect to see a bit of traction. But also, like, feedback, I can't stress this enough, right? Is when you're a stand-up comedian, your feedback traditionally is the wave of laughter, hopefully, that hits you when you're on the stage, and that buzz you get afterwards, and that nagging self-doubt that the next gig might not be as good as the next one, right? That's why bringing podcasting into the equation as a comedian is really valuable, because it gives you that real-time interaction and insight and feedback loop with your audience. So you're not just, stuck in traffic to get to a gig in Rochdale and then it didn't go well. I think that was the thing I really didn't like about doing stand-up performance as, average white man in a check shirt, is that when the gigs didn't go well, what did you really learn? You knew there were so many variables that could tell you why you didn't get a laugh. And of course, none of them are the fact that you're not funny, because you could have torn it down the night before. So, podcasting will help you work through those variables and decide through kind of metrics, analysis, and audience feedback. You'll be able to interact with them so much more. So again, you kind of just got to change your mindset a little bit and see how you view yourself as a performer. Different microphone, bigger audience, really. I think that's what's been really interesting about taking Wrestling with a Champ into the performance comedy, because we get more listeners every month than gigs we've ever played. We did a nice open spot for Just a Tonic in Leicester back in November. 70 or 80 people in the room. It was all sold out. And I said to Ant, we get more listeners than this. So what are you trying to achieve? We can get 1,000, 1,500 listeners a month on the podcast with one episode a month. We've managed to grow that with our kind of approach to podcasting and live performances. But there's always that thing in the back of your mind is, how am I going to grow? And is stand-up performing the only route you should be taking to growth in comedy? I think podcasting has and should be a game changer. You just need the strategy behind.
So do you kind of see the shows as promotion for the podcast, or the podcast as promotion for the show? Or was it kind of a virtuous circle?
Another great question, Dan. You are the king of great questions today. We were podcast first, and then and a lot of podcasts make that leap, right? I think if you start off as a comedian and it feels weird now, right? Just to start on stage with no proof, with no social proof that you're going to be funny. You're just taking a punt on some jokes that you've written and evolving your material that way. And of course, that is expensive. That requires a lot of time. That requires a lot of effort. It helps with the networking, right? You don't lose that. But performing through podcasting is a really valuable, or not really shortcut, but if you want to go to the gym more than once a week, go 2 or 3 times a week, get a podcast, or be really funny on social media, or find another avenue to kind of, stretch those muscles. So I think, with podcast that is a live show that you can come and see, and it works really well. But then my point earlier was then you've got what you're trying to move audience A to be audience B to come and see you. But then when you've got audience B that are not entirely made up of your listeners, you can then push them back to being audience A and create this kind of community of listeners for yourself. And then in a cynical way, you're able to do marketing to them. You can build your email lists. You can get them to follow on social. You can do giveaways. You can do content. You're really helping move your brand forward much quicker than you would do if you were just on stage, because you are putting your comedy where they are, which is on their phones 18 hours a day.
One last question, if it's okay. How much interaction do you have with other acts? So, I was having a look on the site. There's like 10 at the same venue as you, 10 altogether. Obviously, there's 3,000 acts altogether. Is there much kind of cross-promotion or working together or sharing insights and so on?
3,318.
You've been looking as well, yes.
Isn't it scary? So you don't know when you look down the street who you need to... have you got a show? Oh, you have got a show. Right, well, I won't waste my money on a flyer that's going to end up in a recycling bin. Yeah, there is actually Alex Leam, who's doing a show at Burrito and Shake. We have performed with, I did an open spot for him. He does like a improv provocateur. It's Whose Line Is It Anyway? And he was asking for you've got a Facebook group, so I should probably start with that. So if you do the PBH Free Fringe, you can join Fringe performers and swap spots and open spots and ask for help and things like that. Really supportive group that you should be joining if you're a performer. And he's like, I've got this show. I need some comedians. Fine, come in. So we did a gig from him. Weirdly, when we were on the bill for somebody else, he was another spot in the middle of the show. And we're like, hey, we know you. And then now we're at the same venue together this year. So it's just, it is actually a small world. 3,000 people sounds like a lot, but even we would spend some time so that the photo you'll see on our artwork of me and Ant, little and large, happy and sad, whatever you want to call it, was taken outside the Gilded Balloon, I want to say, or the Underbelly, that kind of big sort of bar, restaurant-y kind of area, really nice. And so we're like, well, let's just do a walk around there. And the amount of people that we knew from different walks of life that were comedians. So James Barr, who's a very funny stand-up comedian and radio presenter, we used to work together back at this radio station, Red Dragon, in 2004, 2005. And it's weird how the world is actually quite small, but you've probably bumped into them in previous lives. So yeah, you do interact a little bit. Joey Rinaldi is another act who we saw. His show last year was, I think it was along the lines of Mum, Help, I Broke My Penis, or similar thing, but it was about this anecdote from his childhood where he did actually break his penis. So we started talking to him. I think he came to see our show or said he did and found it funny. We'll take that. But then we had him on our podcast as a character and we kind of kept in touch. So as we grow, the likes of Podomedy, that's a podcast comedy network where comedians can join with their podcasts and we can work with them to grow their audience and find new audience. Joey will be somebody we'll have a conversation with over in New York. If he's got a podcast, it's a nice slipstream for him. So I think there are many valuable networking opportunities, whether you want a beer or you've got some advice to offer. But yeah, I mean, we won't get around all 3,318, Dan, if that's what you're asking. But yeah, you inherently, just by being, and I would say, stay out for a little bit, have a night where you're up until 2:00 in the morning in the kind of key footfall areas. We bumped into so many comedians that we're in touch with now that we'll see again. And that's how you kind of develop your networking, right? And I think, do it for a year, come back for the next year and grow that way.
Thanks very much for taking part. Have a great Fringe. Thanks for listening. If you enjoyed this, check out our other episodes where we speak to a number of performers about their experiences at the Edinburgh Fringe, as well as with creatives in other industries about making creativity pay.